And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soul Survivor podcast. Ryan and I back to recap Survivor 44, episode 11. We're already here, episode 11, heading into the penultimate episode on Wednesday. So, we're a little bit late on the podcast here. I had to attend my brother's graduation in Florida, so was doing that. So, just got back the other day. But still got a podcast before the next episode. So we're back here. And while we're at it, talking about episode 11, we'll preview the penultimate episode of Survivor season 44. So excited to get into that. How are you doing, Ryan?
Dylan, I'm doing well. So big week last week. Brother's graduation. Danny does a Robert De Niro impression. Then Robert De Niro has the seventh child. So a big week last week for a lot of things.
Yeah, big week for a lot of things. My brother, big week for him. Big week for Robert De Niro.
Yeah.
So look, love to see it. But yeah, we definitely had one of the most eventful tribal councils of the season so far. And I'm excited to dive into that immediately here. We had Danny go home, as you just mentioned, from a great play, or, depends on how you want to view it. I think personally it was a great play, but we could get into this. Carolyn plays her idol for Carson, and Danny ends up going home in a 3-2-2 vote. But it turns out that the idol, wouldn't have played a factor, but she played it just in case. So it was a successful idol play, but also because it canceled 2 votes, but also not exactly the reason why Danny went home. So a lot to discuss there. But yeah, there was a lot of fireworks at this tribal council, to say the least.
You had Carolyn get into a fight with Jeff almost. You can't get any crazier than that. Listen, I think Carolyn was obviously once again the star of the episode, not just from the whole lobster scene, but just this whole tribal council. And yeah, you bring up the point that she plays her idol for Carson, but Carson would have been safe either way because it was a 3-2-2 vote. Now, the question of the episode is, did Carolyn waste her idol? You sounds like you were alluding to the fact that you think she didn't waste it and she had to play it kind of regardless. I agree. I'm of the same opinion. I think that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I feel like we all were shocked as the audience that Lauren and Jamie voted with Tika. Now, obviously, they felt like it was going to be a split vote between Danny and Heidi. Tika will put 3 votes on Danny. Lauren and Jamie go on Heidi. So that way, no matter what, Danny or Heidi will go home unless they play 2 idols. And I guess Carolyn, she has really good reads and is thinking, well, everyone's saying they're going to vote Danny, but my gut's telling me that they're not going to do it. And I think if Jamie and Lauren were playing correctly, they would have voted out maybe Carson there and taken the power away from Tika. So I think she was right to play the idol to at least prevent against it from happening. I think it was a safe play to do.
Excuse me. So yeah. So I agree with that completely, right? In a perfect world, or I should say in a setting where everyone makes the correct moves in Survivor, I think we could agree that it was the right move to try and break up the Tika if you're Lauren and Jamie. I'm not exactly sure why they didn't try to do that. Clearly they were just set on getting Danny out. But now they're in a big, I should say, conundrum where the Tika 3 are still there. And now the numbers are 3-3 if you do it like that, right? Heidi, Lauren, and Jamie, we don't even know if they're going to end up working together. And then the Tika 3. So, again, we're not really seeing Lauren and Jamie's stories much. So it's hard for us to know what exactly their reasoning was. Maybe we'll hear it next week. But from the Tika perspective that we're seeing, it would make sense for people to try and come at them, people to try and, break up the Tika 3. So I think to make sure, if you were set on, okay, we need to have this Tika 3 at the final 6, which I think is the right move for them. They need to, have at least, half the votes at the final 6, or if they get people to vote with them, they have the majority completely. So, you had to keep Carson in for this vote if you're Carolyn. And the only way to ensure that happens, knowing where the votes are going, is to play your idol on them. You can't trust people that are outside your core alliance to make that happen. I think, you're already at the final 6, or I should say final 7. So there's only 2 more times you could use the idol anyway. You don't even know if there's going to be an ideal time to use it. So to me, it's just use it now, make sure you have numbers heading into 6. assuming that maybe Lauren and Jamie will not vote or will turn, and then move on from there. So now she does the safe play. It's not like the complete flashiest thing because Carson would have been safe anyway. That being said, she, went the secure way and made sure that the Tika 3 are sitting there at the final 6. So I do think it was the right move for her.
I think also, Dylan, I heard a really interesting conversation on one of Rob's podcasts that I didn't really factor in because, here's the thing. In the new era, we always talk about lately, are people peaking too early? Shan makes a big move, then Shan goes home. Omer takes Andrea out, and then Omer goes. And it's like, my first thought with this episode is like, oh no, has Carolyn really raised her threat level? People are like, well, now we have to take her seriously. She's not being as wacky as we think she is. She's actually a good player. Will this spike her threat level? Should she have not done this? Granted, Carson would have been safe, but like, was this dangerous to kind of maybe make her a target next week for the non-Tikas, or maybe even if Jam Jam decides to turn on Carolyn? But I was thinking about this from the other podcast, and they were saying, like, for some people like a Carolyn, you almost, if the jury's not taking you seriously, you almost need to make this move. Granted, you make it too early, you're going to be a threat, but you kind of wait till the end where there's more people on the jury and they can kind of see you do this move. They might be more impressed with you and they may respect your game more. And I guess the example that they were saying was like, Marianne did the whole thing where she like pulled out the idol at Final Tribal Council. She's like, I didn't even need to use it, but people didn't need to respect her more because she had already taken out Omer already. So that was already a huge move on her resume. And people already were like, okay, well, Marianne's kind of playing in some ways. If you think back to Xander had the idol. Xander never used it. But instead of people being like, oh, Xander's so good, he didn't have to use it, they were like, well, Xander, you didn't have to use it because we were never voting for you because you're not a threat to our game. So I feel like in that example, if that makes sense, Carolyn probably felt like she had to play it, not just to save Carson, but also she now gets a lot more respect from the other players.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, actually, right? Because we're hearing firsthand from everybody else on the season, basically, of people that, aren't taking her seriously and are like, we've seen basically the whole story with Danny and Carolyn the entire time was that Danny was never taking her seriously. And she finally, she wins the fight at the end and she votes out Danny. But I think that kind of echoed, a lot of other people's views. We heard like some people talk about, particularly Franny, how much she likes Carolyn. Now Franny's sitting on the jury, so that's good for Carolyn. But other than Franny, I'm not really sure she had the respect of, she has the respect of the other players. Now I could tell you that for sure people are looking at her as a real player in this game. But here's the thing with Carolyn, and I think that people are going to look at Jam Jam as a bigger threat than her still. So, we heard what everyone was saying about Jam Jam last episode, that everyone loves him on the jury. You cannot let him get to the final 3. So if you're Carolyn, you're like, you know what? Jam Jam's name has come up so many times. I don't think that me making one move is going to change that he's still, quote unquote, a bigger threat than me, or at least viewed that way. So I think that, clearly you have to weigh a decision here. Do you potentially raise your threat level at risk of going home next week? You have not been good in any immunity challenges. You're probably not going to win an immunity challenge unless you find another idol that is re-hidden into the game. Your chances of being immune are probably very slim. That being said, again, you have to keep in mind the threat level of the people around you. And in my opinion, there's still at least 1 or 2 more players that are viewed as more threatening still in the game. So I think that in this case, she is fine.
My other question for you about Carolyn, and I'm almost wondering, Dylan, if we're at the point now where maybe this is a rule that production has. So the other thing about the tribal council vote was that Carolyn actually writes Lauren down. Like, she takes a long time in the booth. She writes down, and I think we see her counting out the number. She probably voted for Lauren originally in case maybe there was an idol, or in case Danny and Heidi were both safe, so no votes fell on her possibly. But she writes Lauren down, she crosses it out, and then she finally writes down Danny. But this is the same thing that happened to Aubrey in Co Wrong, where she wrote down Julia, crossed it out, and then she voted out Peter. But Dylan, my question for you was like, do you think both Aubrey and then also, I guess in this case with Carolyn, they just weren't thinking to cross the name out entirely? Or do you think production is like, no, if you wrote it down, you get to cross it out, but you got to make sure we can still read what you wrote? Because I cannot for the life of me figure out, like, because Lauren's going to come out to camp and say, it doesn't matter that you changed your mind. You still wrote my name down to begin with. Like, that's not going to be a good look for Carolyn. So I feel like, do you think that she just forgot to cross the whole thing out? Or do you think production says, if you write it down, you've got to just do one line and that's it?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, okay, so first off about your point, I did want to talk about this. I think the reason why she was originally going to vote Lauren is basically just to, worst comes to worst, it goes to a revote and you could revote out Danny. But like that, in case three idols are played and everyone is safe, you don't want you going home, right? So that was something that she voiced as a concern. So it's clear why Lauren was in the picture for her. I don't know. That's pretty interesting. Honestly, that didn't cross my mind about the one line thing. My guess is that because it's Carolyn, she just forgot to cross it out completely. But like you said, because there's a precedent to this happening in the past, you said Aubrey fully crossed out or didn't fully cross it out in her season?
I need to go back and look. I'm pretty sure she wrote down a name. She did the one line cross and then wrote someone else. But like, you could clearly see that she wrote someone else's name down.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know if that's a rule. I could easily see Carolyn just like not thinking about it because she's Carolyn. But how funny was it when she was literally just sitting up there, just counting like for like 5 minutes? I was like, oh God, what's going to happen here?
Well, it reminded me of Millennials Gen X, where Hannah took like 10 minutes in the voting booth, and you even see Jeff like pop his head in, like, did she pass out in there or something? Or
I had one last hope there for a second that like some kind of advantage was gonna pop up at the chessboard when she was like counting, and then I was like, nope, didn't happen this time. It's not happening in season 44. But so that was also
one. I think there's, because I know we've been wanting this all season. I think there might be one last chance for it, but I don't think it's gonna happen. In the new era, they always open up the finale with like a advantage search with a little word scramble. Now they probably will do that again on the beach, but there's a chance that they make the opening finale advantage at the chessboard. But I think that's our last chance.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess if it's not now, maybe it's never, or maybe it's in the next 2 seasons, as they keep saying. So, yeah, that was interesting. Now, I almost, okay, I think the rest of this podcast we could just discuss, other things that happened in this episode, and then we could just kind of, we'll make that a little bit short, but I kind of want to focus mostly on the final 6 and like our power rankings and like certain outcomes that we think could happen, because I'm sure that everybody listening to this, it's already Monday at this point. Everybody listening to this has probably listened to a bunch of different podcasts recapping, so we don't need to run through the recap completely. Yeah. But I think that it is interesting, this final 6. So I'm excited to get into that as well. But, a few other things in this episode that are worth pointing out. Last gasp we had. Shout out to Survivor for succeeding in this challenge. What I mean by that is they finally had a winner. They didn't have 2 players outlast the challenge. So that was pretty funny. Again, I hope they keep bringing back old challenges like this, because the last 2 seasons, like I love this. And it was pretty funny that Jam Jam was so into the challenge that he didn't even realize he'd won. I was like, I got nervous for a second. I was like, is he like out cold? Like what's going on?
Yeah. Last Gasp is a classic. I love it. It blows my mind when I realize that we've actually only done it 5 times. If you don't count the new era, only 3 times. It was done in Palau, Micronesia, and Karamoan. For some reason, I thought we've done this a lot more, but it's only been 3 times before the new era, and then we did it last season and this season. And yeah, no, credit to Jam Jam. I'll be honest, I didn't think Jam Jam was going to win. I felt like my bet was on Danny, because Danny, if you look at his Twitter and stuff, he's all about, breathing and ice baths and meditation. I felt like Danny, with his breathing, I thought he was going to win it, but it came down to actually Jam Jam and
Heidi. Ryan. Looks like Ryan may have lost connection. Oh wait, are you back?
Are you good?
Yeah, you're back. You're back. What's up?
Oh, it was Jam Jam and Heidi.
Yeah, Jam Jam and Heidi.
Okay, yeah. No, so yeah, I mean, it was a classic challenge. Like you said, always want to see more classic challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, and then one other thing I want to like particularly focus on, related to Carolyn at the beginning of this episode, right? So I think another reason why her threat level is just, honestly, it's never going to get above Jam Jam, is that, like, for example, you had this vote out, the week before Danny, with Franny, where Carolyn gets left out of the vote, and she's like outwardly yelling and like complaining to Jam Jam and Carson on the beach, to the point where everybody else back at camp can hear her, and everyone's looking like, oh, what's going on? Like, Carolyn could get really upset if she gets voted out. I think like her emotions, that sometimes we talk about players being like emotional players and how that could be bad. But like, I think that in this case, it could come as an advantage, like in the spot she's in, because just naturally you're going to be like, oh, she plays with her emotions. Like, maybe she's not as huge of a threat as Jam Jam. So I think that was one thing. And another thing is, we were confirmed that she never told anyone about the idol until this episode. So props to Carolyn for that, because I had thought the entire time that she probably told Jam Jam at some point.
So I was nervous at first, speaking of that, when she tells Carson that she's going to play it on him, because granted, I didn't think Carson was going to turn around and get Carolyn voted out, because that wouldn't benefit him in any way. But I don't know. For some reason, I was nervous that the word would get out and it would make her, more into a target. But I feel like this really bonds them together. And like you said, we're going to go later into this podcast about the final six. Where do people stand? What's their path like? Everything like that. And the question heading into next week is, is Tika going to stay Tika strong and control the final six with half the votes? Or are they going to turn? And again, we don't read too much into the preview, because the preview likes to mislead us and whatever. But we see Jam Jam and Carson talking, and Jam Jam's like, Carolyn's could win this game. Should we take a shot at her? And I feel like after this week, Dylan, I don't feel like Carson will turn on her. I could see Jam Jam turning on her, and I think Jam Jam is still a bigger threat than Carolyn is, like you said. I feel like after she saved him, they seem to have a really close bond, kind of like a mother-son bond in some way. I don't know if Carson will cut her. That doesn't mean that Jam Jam won't go to the others and try to get Carolyn out, and Carson might just like let it happen. I don't see, after she told him, I will play it on you, they had that emotional moment. Because if you look at that moment, Dylan, what's the first thing he says to her? He's not even like, thank you. He goes, I'm so proud of you and I'm so happy for you. Like, they genuinely have a bond. What do you think? I don't think at the final six, Carson will be the one to turn on Carolyn, though.
I agree with that. And let's honestly just get right into this predictions part of next episode, because again, I think we hit on the tribal council, some of the main things from last episode, but this is like the perfect segue. So in my opinion, I think that this could be Jam Jam's downfall episode. I think that we've seen several times this season them kind of hinting at like Carolyn and Jam Jam like banging heads, and then it like kind of always resolves. But we're getting late in the game now. Carolyn's been left in the dark a couple of times by Jam Jam, and I think at this point, if she finds out that Jam Jam is going after her, then she's not going to take it well. And I also think this. Let's not forget that Heidi has an idol, right? And let's not forget that everybody views Jam Jam as the biggest threat in this game. And let's also not forget that nobody knows, I believe nobody knows about Heidi's idol. So I think this is a major opportunity to get Jam Jam out of this game. If you are 3-3 right now, and again, we don't even know if Heidi and Lauren and Jamie are going to end up working together, because Lauren and Jamie threw votes on Heidi, right? They voted for Heidi this week. The two or no?
Wait, what was your question?
Did they voted? Lauren and Jamie voted Heidi, correct?
Yeah.
Right. So it's not a complete guarantee that they're going to get together and vote against the Tikas, right? So I think that Heidi, she's held on to her idol for this long. Props to her. She only has 2 tribals left to make the move. Now, granted, she has gotten votes at every single tribal, so maybe she is still a target this episode. Maybe she makes the big move on Jam Jam, and maybe she loops in Caroline or doesn't. But I would think that this is a prime opportunity for a Jam Jam blindside. I feel like it's going to happen in this episode. That's my prediction.
Yeah. So again, I feel like the show maybe wants us to believe that Carolyn could be a target here now that she's made this move. I would agree, though. I feel like even if Jam Jam feels like Carolyn could beat him, I don't know. I just feel like if I was Jam Jam, and granted we don't see it the way they see it out there, I would think Carson is my biggest threat to win. I think when we talked last week, if the Tika 3 sets at the end, who wins? I think we both feel like it might be Jam Jam. Maybe we said Carson, but I feel like Jam Jam, if he gets there, will win this game no matter what over anybody. But I feel like you're right, where if Jam Jam goes to Carson next week and says, hey, we could just pick off Heidi, Jamie, Lauren, or after last week, she saved you, Carolyn could win this game. I don't know if Carson would run back and tell her, but I feel like you're right. Maybe it could blow up on Jam Jam. Maybe people see him as a threat. They throw the votes onto Heidi. Heidi plays the idol. Jam Jam ends up going home possibly. I don't think it's Carson. I think Carson might be locked in for Final Four, and then not just because of the foreshadowing that they've been doing, but I just feel like Carolyn doesn't want to get rid of him. Sounds like Jam Jam doesn't want to get rid of him. And Dylan, I was thinking to myself, why would Jamie and Lauren vote Heidi here? It makes no sense. Why would they not just vote out Tika with Danny and Heidi and split that threesome up? The only thing I can think of is that they were talking with Carson at the water well, and maybe when Carson went to Ratu in that 3-person swap, maybe like they don't show us everything. Maybe he has a better bond with Lauren and Jamie than we really realize, and maybe they're like, we don't want to vote out Carson here. We'd rather just get rid of Danny. That's the only thing I can think of why they didn't want to turn on Carson there. But in that scenario, I don't think the non-Tikas would go for Carson. They would go for Jam Jam, maybe. So,
yeah, I think that even after this move, I think Jam Jam is going to be the main target for pretty much everybody not Tika left, right? Heidi, I would have to think, wants to get rid of Jam Jam. Lauren, Jamie, I would want, if they're going to get rid of a Tika, it's going to be Jam Jam, or they're going to at least attempt to do that. The big thing is that there are not a lot of immunity threats left, right? So you have to think that probably Jam Jam and Carson are the two favorites to win immunity challenges from here on out, right? So if Jam Jam were to win immunity, then we have a very interesting scenario, right? Then it's like, well, you have the Heidi idol and you have Jam Jam immune. Who is getting voted out in that scenario? I could see, Jam Jam trying to be extra aggressive in trying to maybe blindside Carolyn if he does have the immunity idol around his neck. The only thing is, like, I can't really see Carson flipping, and I find it hard to believe that anybody outside of Tika is going to want to work with Jam Jam at this point. Like, what is the benefit to helping Jam Jam if you're anybody else out there? So it is an interesting point in the season. We've seen the Tika 3 almost fracture several times. I'm wondering if this is where it actually happens.
So let me ask you another question then. So if you're Tika, like you said, if you're not with Tika, so Heidi, Jamie, Lauren, you want to get Jam Jam out here as a big winner threat. If you're Tika, you maybe want to keep working with Jam Jam possibly as a shield, or because you want to keep working with Tika. But my question is, what was the question? Well, A here, while I'm thinking of the other question, because I saw this in the chat, do you think Carolyn's idol will get rehidden at the final 6? Because you can play idols up until final 5. We only have Heidi's left. They could possibly hide Carolyn's again. What do you think?
It's tough, right? Because, like, what's that advantage going to be at the start of the finale, if there is, right? So my guess is that with Heidi having an idol, I don't think it gets rehidden, and I just think that an advantage happens at the final 5. That's what I hope, at least. Mm-hmm. That being said, I wouldn't put it past anyone to – I wouldn't put it past Survivor to rehide the idol. If I had to guess, I'd say no, but anything's possible in the new era, so we'll have to see. But as of now, I'm anticipating just the Heidi idol plus whoever wins immunity being, a threat of having immune. Like, the only advantage I think that is going to be out there is the idol until the final 5.
So the other question that I had that I also have been debating is, like, so even if you are Tika and you are like, well, I don't want to vote out Jam Jam because we're working together, but he could be a threat. I feel like you need to make sure you save a spot for Jamie, because I feel like, Jam Jam, you don't want him to get to the end, but you also want to make sure that I feel like at this point, Jamie's got to be a lock for the end, right? I feel that if you're Lauren, you already like working with Jamie as your former ally. And if you're everybody else, they all think she's a bad liar. She's kind of been delusional in terms of where she thinks she sits in the game. I feel like again, not to read the edit, but they've just been painting her out in this way. So I feel like if you're everybody else in the game, you're going to want to prioritize getting out Jam Jam. If you can't get Jam Jam, you might take a shot at Carson. Maybe Heidi still gets her name thrown around. I just don't see people wasting one of the next 2 votes on Jamie. And I feel like Jamie's the person that would maybe get brought to the final 3 in that case.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that we've seen her 0 vote finalist story, right? We've seen that she's not gotten anything right. We've seen that everyone thinks that she's delusional, and we've seen that she's delusional. Like you said, everyone thinks she's a bad liar. I think that if Jam Jam is immune, or if it's not Jam Jam this week, I think Lauren is probably the way this goes, right? Because like Heidi's not going to go home with an idol at final 6, you would think. And then I would think that they would want to keep Jamie around. So I'm guessing it's either going to be Lauren or Jam Jam if I had to predict. My prediction is if we want to even get further deeper in, because I know we have a lot of questions. The way I think this ends up playing out is I think Jam Jam potentially gets blindsided next week by a Heidi idol, or maybe even Carolyn if she maybe gets word back to her that Jam Jam's going for her. I mean, here's the thing, right? If you're Jam Jam, it is, and let me make this clear, it is insane to be going around throwing out Carolyn's name if you're Jam Jam at final 6. Why would you do that? Everybody already likes you, right? Even if you want to get Carolyn out, this is the perfect opportunity for the other 3 to see a crack in this alliance. It's the perfect opportunity for Heidi or Lauren or Jamie to run back to Carolyn and be like, hey, Jam Jam has been saying your name all day. Like, why would you? That all it does is raises his threat level, right? So he already is at this threat level. If you're Jam Jam, you should be trying to lower your threat level and saying, how could I sneak to the end when everybody likes me and everybody sees me as the biggest threat? So for him to even be throwing out Carolyn's name, I don't know if he's, it looked like he was telling other people that. If he's just telling us to the camera, fine. But like, if he's going around throwing out Carolyn's name at final 6, that's a crazy move in my opinion. So that's why I really do fear for him next week. But so if I had to predict, I say Jam Jam goes at 6. I think Lauren will be the next target at 5. And then, like a lot of people are commenting in this chat, Carson at Fire they're showing us this guy is going to compete in Fire. I would think if he doesn't, I'll be almost shocked at this point. Yeah. One, I don't see him going at final 5 or final 6 at this point. He's a really good immunity challenge, threat with the way he's 3D printed all the puzzles. So I foresee him probably winning at least one of those. And then at final 4, you would think that nobody's going to bring him to the end. So if he doesn't win immunity, you would think he gets put into Fire. And if he does win immunity, is he the type that is going to say, I practice Fire like I practiced the 3 puzzles. There's no way I lose Fire. I'm going to go take out a Carolyn to win this game. I think that's a very decent possibility. So yeah, I do. For those people who are asking in the comments, yeah, I do see Carson for sure competing at Final 4 Fire making, whether he wins or loses that final challenge.
Yeah, so in your scenario, if Jam Jam goes, Lauren goes, Carson could either win or lose Fire. So your final 3, it sounds like, would be some combination of either Heidi, Carson, Jamie, or maybe Heidi, Carolyn, Jamie is kind of like what you're maybe thinking of for the final 3.
So I think, yeah, I have a feeling that Heidi versus Carson is going to be the final 4 Fire making challenge, with a slight chance of also Carolyn being there, right? I could see it's tough, right? The thing is, everybody seems to see Heidi as a threat because she keeps getting votes, right? So I don't foresee anybody wanting to take her. That being said, how much will Carolyn raise her threat level by the end? Or will Heidi end up playing her idol at final 6 and then she is idol-less for final 5 and then she ends up going instead of Lauren at that spot? So there's a lot of different things that could happen, but Stephen Fishback has talked for the last few seasons on his podcast about what a final 5 boot edit looks like. And it is Lauren. So that's why I'm kind of set on Lauren being the 5th placer here. And then maybe Heidi versus Carson or Carson versus Carolyn in Fire. I could see Heidi maybe, let's just say she were to beat Carson in Fire, which again, if Carson doesn't win fire, I would be maybe the most shocked person of all time. But if Heidi were to beat him in fire and she goes, let's say, against Carolyn and Jamie, I could see her. I don't think she wins, depending, again, this is fully depending that she doesn't make some crazy idol move. Like I saw some people speculating in the chat here. Maybe she makes a Marianne type move. I don't see that happening. If that does happen, I think that would be a major twist, considering we did not see Heidi at all for most of the beginning of the season. Again, based on the edit of some of the last winners, nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible anymore. We're not calling anybody dead. But I've been of the party that's one of the Tika, and so is everybody, that one of the Tika is going to end up winning the game. So anyway, that's a long ramble, but yeah, I could see a final three of a Carolyn, Heidi, or Jamie, or Carolyn, Carson, and Jamie, or Carson, Heidi, Jamie type final three. Like I think those four are the final four.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think every jury has their own rubric. Like, obviously, it'll depend on what the players do at final six, at final five, who makes a move, whether it's a subtle move or a big move, that will play a factor. I think when it comes to the jury, in 41 and 42, the winner, Erica and Marianne, were people that actually didn't win fire, didn't win the final immunity. They were brought to the end. Xander brought Erica and Romeo brought Marianne, and they won. Meanwhile, last season, the jury, and it sounded like Erica and Marianne won because the jury felt like they had played the best game of the people sitting there. In last season, and I know maybe last season is going to be like an anomaly, you can't count it, but it's like the jury seemed to be like, whoever slays Jesse will win. And the fact that Gabler did it in fire made it even more impressive to them. And they're like, you know what? Whoever wins in fire, because it sounded like in Final Four, Jesse was always going to be in fire. No one was ever taking him. He was never going to win a challenge. So whether it was Owen, Cassidy, or Gabler, one of them was going to slay Jesse in fire. And it sounds like whoever won in fire was going to win the game. So this season, to go back to your point, if Heidi slays Carson in fire, does Heidi win? Because they're like, okay, they took Carson out. You think from your scenario, Jam Jam will make it to Final Four. Let's say for the sake of argument, Jam Jam does make it to Final Four. If he gets taken out in fire, will they vote for the fire winner? Or will the jury say, we don't care about the fire. We want to just see of the people there who played the best game. So it will depend on a couple different things, I feel like.
The only way I want fire to matter at the end is if somebody's giving up their necklace to take out the biggest threat. That I think is important, but I don't think it's important if like you just win a fire to get to the end, if that makes sense.
So but here's my question to you then. Do you feel like that will ever happen again? I feel like the Chris Underwood scenario was the only way that works out because Chris had to come back into the game from edge of extinction and nobody was going to beat Rick Devens in fire except for Chris. And Chris had to prove like I did every single thing I could to show you that I deserve to win this game. And that's what he did. Even last season, we were saying, I think we said on the podcast, will someone put themselves into fire to take Jesse out? But Cassidy was like, I'm not going to do it. Like Gabler can go do it. Granted, she didn't realize that the jury was going to vote for Gabler because they were all shocked. But like, I still don't feel like we use the term final boss, but like, I don't think Jam Jam or Carson are at that Jesse level where it's like, you need to put yourself into fire. I don't know if we see that happen again.
I think it happens again eventually. What does it happen this season? I don't know. Like, and again, it's tough because I do think there is a certain amount of pressure to put yourself in the fire.
Yeah,
personally, it's not something I would ever do. If I was out there and I make the final three, I am going to the final three. It's as simple as that. I don't want to be the person who gives up immunity and loses fire. And I'm somebody that I feel like I could pitch my case. I'm not going into fire if I win the immunity challenge. That being said, let's not forget Cassidy gets to the end and she had no respect. Everyone was like, why would you not go into the fire? Like, why would you not do that? So I do think that there is a certain pressure to do it. And if Carson does feel like I have been with, let's just say, Carolyn or Jam Jam this entire game, I don't know how I could differentiate my games from them. I also think I have the best chance to win fire because I practiced at home for days and days and days. It's like if he was going up in a puzzle against somebody instead of fire, it's a no-brainer for him because he's so good at puzzles. Is he that good at fire also? We don't really know yet. Like we just seen him looking at the fire. We haven't seen him doing fire.
But it's like, and I agree. I just feel like I don't think Carson would do it for shits and giggles, but it's like, I mean, I don't think he needs to do it to take out Carolyn or Jam Jam. Certainly not Jamie, Heidi, or Lauren. The only person this season that I feel like Carson would have maybe needed to do that for is maybe if Franny had gotten there. Like if Franny was already on an immunity run, she was like the Kelly Wigglesworth or like the Kim Spradlin, like win 4 challenges in a row or whatever it is, and like Carson had to take her out to win. Maybe then I could see it because everyone's like Franny was going to win this game if she got to the end. But I feel like now that Franny's gone, it's like I don't even know if Carson needs to do it, honestly. But you're right. I feel like the Chris scenario was just so weird. I also would never put myself into fire. And Dylan, we're young. I mean, imagine if you have a family. Because again, if people don't realize, yes, you win $1 million if you win, but second and third place also get a part of the prize pots. And if you get fourth, that prize pot goes down. And I remember Dominic famously said in Ghost Island, like, my wife would have killed me if I took my necklace off, went against Wendell and lost. Like, she would have killed me. So it's like, I feel like other than a significantly weird scenario like EOE, I feel like most people are just never going to give up their necklace, despite what the jury thinks.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you have a pretty good point there. And let me ask you this. So I kind of laid out the way I think the rest of the season is going. What's your take?
So I agree. I feel like it's too, quote unquote, too easy for Tika to stick together. The simplest answer is like, Tika, just stick together. Just choose one of the other 3 to vote out. Make it Heidi. If you're scared of her idol, make it Lauren, whatever. I just feel like that's too easy. I feel like Tika will fracture next week, whether that means Jam Jam goes for Carolyn and it works and Carolyn goes home, or if it means that Jam Jam goes for Carolyn and then it gets back to the others and then Carolyn finds out. So I feel like next week it'll be either Jam Jam or Carolyn personally. You said Jam Jam, I'll say Carolyn, but I think it might be Jam Jam. The Lauren Final 5 edit is so weird to me because she started out as a big threat with her extra votes. Meanwhile, she's the only person left this season to not have her name written down yet. So pretty impressive. And I guess that speaks to her social game, even though we're not seeing it at all on camera. Let's make it fun. If we say the same thing, it might be kind of just boring. So you're saying Jam Jam and Lauren as the final 2 people out in 6 and 5 before Fire. I'll say Carolyn and Heidi. I actually think you might be right, but I'll be contrarian and say Carolyn and Heidi. In that scenario, I could see a situation where Jamie makes it to the end. Carson either loses the challenge and has to verse Jam Jam and Fire, maybe verse Lauren and Fire. Possibly he wins. He makes Jam Jam and Heidi go against each other. That's what I'll say. So I think both of our scenarios have a chance of happening. We seem to kind of get to the same answer of like who might win and who will be at the end. But I could see it going in a couple different ways to get there.
Jay says I could also see Heidi getting the final 5 edit. I think you're right. You could be right about that as well. The final 5 edit has historically been 2 things. It's usually like the player. A lot of the final 5 edit has been like the person who doesn't get a lot of airtime. That kind of comes on strong at the end, like a little bit stronger. Like if you look at it was a little bit different. I believe Carla was out at Final 5 last season. Is that correct? Right. Mm-hmm. So she was strong the entire season. So last season was an anomaly in several circumstances. So that she was not the typical Final 5 edit. I'm thinking more like a Lindsay, who we didn't really hear much from her at the beginning, and then she kind of came on strong at the end. Like very likable person, likable player, but like we kind of knew she wasn't going to win. Then season 41, the final 5 boot was season 41? Who's the final 5 boot? Why am I blanking? Ricard. That was another. Okay, so that was another anomaly to the thing. But like your Laurens in season 38, who had come on strong, at the end, where you're like, if she gets to the end, she could win. Your Lindsay's. I don't know. It's one of those things that I know, but I can't articulate. That being said, Lauren kind of has like an opposite. It's like Lauren was like started up here and then kind of came down, but like she also has gotten more like her character arc has been like this, where her strategic arc has been like this. So I don't really know how to weigh that. But I'm gonna say Lauren goes final five regardless. I'm gonna say she gets the final five edit. Oh, what were you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say that. I mean, and this is why the last few seasons have been so unpredictable. Not that we're trying to read the edit, because obviously we want to, be surprised and we don't want the story to be told to us. But when we have the last few seasons, it's kind of like a little bit of a template. We're almost thinking to ourselves, how has the story been told? Because Erica's story wasn't really told. Marianne's story was pretty clear. Gabler had hiding in plain sight. So that, for whoever wins this season, what is like their story? And I feel like what we're saying, and I know Jay's mentioned this a couple times in the comments, and we'll get to it in the questions, does everybody left in the game have some sort of a story? Does Jamie have a story? I don't think so. But I think everybody else, and we'll get into the questions, I feel like everybody else, I can see their story. Lauren's is a bit tougher. If she wins, I would be disappointed only because I feel like she actually has played a decent game, kind of like an Erica, but we just have not seen it. Even like Heidi, where I still think the Tika 3 are going to win one of them, I can at least see Heidi's story as the game progresses. So I think we're just trying to figure out how has the narrative been going for these players since like the first episode.
Yeah, I think this will be the like this will be, we could officially rule a few players out this week if Jamie doesn't really get, I mean, I think Jamie's drawing dead regardless, but if Lauren doesn't really get much more this week, you could probably say it's completely out. Same with Jamie. I said I already think is drawing dead, but we'll know this week. Who has the narrative going, who has a potential narrative going into the finale. But let's get to some questions here because I know there were a few flying in as we were going.
Yeah, sure.
We kind of addressed this already from Andrew. He said thoughts on Carson winning or losing fire. I think we both agree that he's getting the fire and probably going to be in the fire. So, yeah, we already addressed that, but just wanted to make sure you saw that we saw. Let's see what else we got. Okay, this is a good question. So, and again, we've kind of addressed it both. But how many of the Tika 3 do you think will make it to the final tribal council? Nate wants to know. I'm gonna go, like I said, my prediction is that only one of them ends up making it because I think it's tough to, at least as a viewer, how am I differentiating between any of the Tika 3 at the final tribal council, right? If Carson and Jam Jam get there, who wins from that? Like the person with the better final tribal council speech? Like I honestly don't know. Carolyn versus Jam Jam, it's like they butted heads a little bit, so it's like, they could probably make arguments against each other where Carolyn could be like, I got left out of the votes and I still prevailed. Jam Jam could be like, I was running the show the entire time. But like Carson and Carolyn, if they went together, what exactly is the argument there? Like, it's like, well, Carolyn gave Carson the idol, so it's kind of hard for Carson to like, it's just like, I don't know. I think only one of them ends up making it. That's my prediction. That might be a bold prediction at this point because there's 3 left and there's only 6 people left total. So what do you think?
I feel like one of them gets there regardless, because obviously there's a choice.
I would hope. I was
going to say the answer to this question is either going to be 0, 1, 2, or 3. I don't think it's 0. I don't know. I don't see a scenario where Lauren, Jamie, and Heidi knock off all 3. The only way they knock off all 3 is if somehow they turn on each other at final 6. Then the 3 ladies pair up and they pick off the other 2 at 5, and then they send one of them to final 4 fire making. I think one of them gets there regardless. I don't think 3 of them get there. I just don't see how that happens. So then the question is it 1 or 2? I feel like I'll say 2. I think maybe two of them will get there.
Cool. Let's see. Jay wants to know, do you guys see Heidi making an aggressive move with her idol and strategizing in such a way that she gets all the votes on herself and idling out Tika? That should be the plan for her. Is I think that, again, I don't know if she's going to be able to get every vote on herself, but maybe she gets like a Carolyn to work with her, right? Let's just say she goes back to Carolyn and says, Jam Jam wants to get you out. I want to get Jam Jam out. Me and you vote for Jam Jam. I have the idol. Just make sure that everyone else is playing. Like, make sure Carson plays the votes on me and like stuff like that. That should this should 100% be her goal. If Heidi wants any chance to win the game, she needs to have a killer move with this idol play. So I'm hoping it happens this week. If it happens final five, it happens final five. I'm hoping she uses it correctly. She's held on to it correctly for so long. So credit to her for that. I hope she uses it correctly.
I wonder. I mean, look, I wonder if she's going to play it regardless. Like, obviously, you can make the argument, like, if you can just wait one more vote and survive, you can use it at final five and guarantee yourself final four. But like you said, she's gotten votes at a lot of these post-merge tribal councils. Danny just got voted out. She just lost her other ally. And she has every right to think, well, if I got 2 votes from Jamie and Lauren last time, what's going to stop them from voting for me again? So whether or not she makes an aggressive move, because I could see her playing it aggressively to get someone out, or I could see her using it more defensively and someone goes out anyway. So I feel like I could see Heidi using it at 6. Now, granted, I mean, her best case scenario is that she wins final 6 immunity, and then it's like, I can just punch my ticket into final 4 and use the idol at 5. But I could see her using it at 6, whether or not it's more defensive, or whether she's like, you know what, no, you know what, I'm not going anywhere. Jamie and Lauren, if you vote with me, we can force a 3-3 Tika split, and maybe Jam or Carson go, oh, or Carolyn says, oh, well, I'll just hop on with you then, and I'll vote out one of my Tika members. So,
yeah. I think you have some good points there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I was just reading through some questions here. All right. Jay wants to know, if you were Jam and you're on the chopping block, what is your strategy to get to the final 5? Maybe throw a Ratu like Lauren under the bus, since a few Ratus are on the jury, and paint her as a threat. Thoughts? If you're Jam right now, the number one way you get to the next week is just obviously winning immunity. But other than that, if he doesn't win immunity, what's the best way? I kind of spoke about this earlier, how I think it's a terrible idea for him to throw Carolyn under the bus. His best move is for the Tika 3 to stick together right now and just to vote out somebody who's not one of the Tika. That's what I think. If he turns on Carolyn, it balloons his threat level even more than what it already is, and it will make Carolyn angry if she finds out. So to me, it's a terrible idea if he does turn on a Tika.
I see your point. I'm trying to wonder, is there another scenario for him? Like, if he turns on Carolyn, either way, if she finds out, if she gets blindsided, she'll be pissed at him. If she finds out before the vote, she'll gun for him. So I don't know if it makes sense to go for Carolyn here. I don't think it makes sense for her to, I don't think it makes sense for Jam to go for Carson here. Now, on the outside, we see Carson as a threat to win. I don't know if Jam sees it. Maybe Jam and Carson have a locked-in final 2, perhaps. But yeah, if you're Jam in that spot, it doesn't behoove you to get rid of Jamie or Lauren. I feel like you're saying it doesn't make sense for him to get rid of Carolyn or target her. So it's like, does he make a shot for Carson? Or does he say to Jamie and Lauren, keep voting with us? Heidi could be a dangerous player. There's a lot of Sokas in the jury. Matt, Franny, Danny are all in the jury. That's 3 votes for her. There's no Tikas in the jury yet. So if you let Heidi get to the end, so maybe he could throw Heidi under the bus. Maybe that's his move. But I don't know. I think you brought it up earlier, though. Like, Jam is already a big target in this game. I'm not sure how much more his level can go down, honestly.
Yeah. Maybe he does throw Heidi under the bus and then she idles him out. So I don't know. maybe that ends up happening. Let's see. What's your thought on if this episode this week had a Cambodia 31 final 6-5? Christian wants to know. Dream come true if it does happen like that, because that was awesome. Maybe we'll get Jeff at the finale, the finale on the island, drawing out a map again to show what happens.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, that was because, you had, some of them was safe with immunity. You had 2 idols played. The only way that this would happen again is if someone is safe next week or in a few days, and then there are 2 idols. But we think the idol won't be rehidden, and there might be the advantage of final 5. But maybe there's a chance that the idol does get rehidden.
And then Christian also wants to know, what's your take if Tika 3 heads to finals? Can it be a repeat of season 36? And then on top of that, I guess as a follow up, you got Nate here who says all 3 Tika at Final Tribal Council might be the best finalists we've ever had. All 3 have a chance to win at their own right. Yeah, that would be crazy if all 3 get there. I don't see how that's very unlikely in my opinion. But if all 3 do get there, that would be wild. And I think so. Here's the thing, back to Christian's original question, could it be a repeat of 36? If 2 of them get there, I think it could be a repeat at 36, right? Because these Tika 3, they played the game together. We're seeing, and like you said, I made the case, like as a viewer, how are we differentiating between, like, we don't necessarily need to be differentiating. We know that the Tika 3 dominated the game. We knew that Dom and Wendell dominated the game. And if Dom and Wendell got to Final Tribal, we legitimately did not know who was going to win. And then you had the split vote. So the answer is, yeah, I could see a tie potentially if there are 2 Tika there, a 4-4 tie.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I think that's why Ghost Island was kind of special in its own way, where, it's the first time we've ever had a tie, and it's why we haven't had one since. I mean, you would think in 44 seasons, I mean, granted, half the seasons have had an odd number jury, so it wasn't going to happen. But like when we've had a chance for a tie, it's only happened once, which tells you how rare it is. So I see your point, Dylan, and also Christian, that if it's the 3 Tikas or 2 Tikas get there, maybe it could be a Ghost Island scenario, but I think the odds of that are just really rare. Also, it was super rare too because Dom got the first 5 votes and Wendell got the second 5 votes, which also is very weird as well. So,
and then Christian's last question here, he wants to know, just curious if the final 4 immunity challenge is dexterity. I think Carson wins it. Thoughts? Dexterity is that a certain challenge or no?
I think what he's referring to is like if it's the challenge from last season that Cassidy won and the one that Kim won, where you kind of move the little bowls through a metal track, and like that's more dexterity. Like so that one, I think honestly the final 4 usually, unless it's like a big elaborate challenge like they used to do in the past, I feel like, or granted the endurances, if it's dexterity like the dishes, or if it's some motion, anybody can win those. Jeremy won after he didn't win all season. Romeo won. Like, I think if it's some motion, anybody can win. And if it's the dexterity challenge, like listen, no shade. Rupert's never going to win that challenge. But like, I mean, most people, I feel like on a given day can win a dexterity challenge. So I feel like, yeah, Carson could win it. But if you told me Lauren pulls it out, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, a lot of it lately we've had those final 4 immunity challenges where like it feels like anybody could win. So yeah. I don't really, especially in this season, I don't have a strong preference between anybody.
The one last thing I want to bring up in terms of a question from my end is Jay had a couple of questions about Jamie, because we keep writing Jamie off, and maybe Dylan were being a little too hasty because Gabler won, and we said up until the very last second Gabler couldn't win. Jay feels like Jamie has a chance in terms of like she's met the most people in the game with Soka's and Ratu's on the jury. She was on Soka and Ratu. Was she right to say she's the most important player? And could Jamie be getting like a Gabler edit where he's hiding in plain sight and Jamie's like, I've got my magic wand? Here's my spin, Dylan. Here's how, if we use, here's the thing. I really miss the jury speeches. I feel like we really missed out in the last 10 seasons from having these roundtables. It's gotten too boring. I want to see people have speeches and have people get ripped to shreds sometimes and have it be more interesting. Here's my spin on this. Jamie has a magic wand. Here's how you spin it to where Jamie's a 0 vote finalist. Yeah, Jamie, you had a magic wand. Your entire game was a fairy tale, and you thought you were in control, and you weren't. So that's the spin where it could be like, yeah, Jamie might be getting that Gabler thing where, oh, she could sneakily win. Yeah, but Gabler, at least I feel like he kept saying hiding in plain sight to tell us he was coming and we never saw it. Jamie tells us more like she thinks she's doing something, right, but she's not.
I think there's a clear difference. Yeah, I think Nate says Jamie's edited very different than Gabler. Gabler was like, how many times did we hear the guy say, I'm hiding in plain sight, I'm Al Gabler, I come up and strike, I wanted what was her name, Ellie gone, and she was gone, now I want this to happen, and I'm just staying under the surface, and I'm gonna call. We're getting some of that from Jamie, except for she's wrong every time in terms of like she just and they're like making it very clear to us that she's been very wrong. So like that's why I think it's almost impossible for her to win.
I mean, Dylan, here's my final question to you. As fans have been watching the show for a long time, and maybe our fandom has changed, or maybe the way we watch Survivor has changed. Are you at, and I feel like I've changed. Are you at the point now where you want to be surprised by the winner, or do you want to like have a very clear idea at the end who's going to win because it tells a story? Because I feel like when I was growing up, I wanted every single vote to be like a surprise to me, and I wanted the winner to be like a surprise. Like, oh my God, I'm so excited to keep tuning in. I'm at the point now where I feel like, yeah, maybe I can get blindsided throughout the season, but if the winner is like not very clear to me, then I feel like the story does not make sense. Like, I'm not going to spoil things, but it's like the ending of Game of Thrones. Like, if I don't understand why they ended up at the end, then it doesn't make sense to me. So I feel like whether it's, again, to go back to the season, the winner should be Carson, Carolyn, or Jam Jam, because I can see how the narrative makes sense. This has been Chica's season. If the other three win, then the editors did not do a good job of telling me how they can win. And I would rather not be blindsided like I was last season because it doesn't make sense to me.
Look, most of the time I'm rooting for the player who plays the best game to win.
Of course, yeah.
There's certain seasons where you get your Dom and Wendell's at the final tribal, and it's like, I'm satisfied either way. But like, there's a reason why people were not happy with Erica's win. It's because the editors didn't show us basically her for the entire first half of the season. So it's like, I want the player that I've seen their game the most to win. And I hope that way we could say to ourselves, that season ended the way it should have. I think that, I think the majority of people were rooting for Jesse to win last season because he had played the best game up until when he lost the Final Four. And I think that Survivor in this new era needs its great winner. Could we be getting it this season? Hopefully.
Yeah, and I think the last thing that I'll say is like, this is even more reason why I feel like we don't need the Final Four fire making, because I think the season ends in different ways, or we see the end game play out differently, and maybe things make more sense. Like, I think if there's no Final Four, because Jeff has said like people want to get on the fire making because Jesse didn't win, and they're like, oh, he was going to get voted out regardless. But I think Jesse actually doesn't cut Cody at Final Six if there's no fire making, and he takes him as his shield. So it's like, I feel like the story makes more sense when there's like less twists and stuff, but that's a whole different rabbit hole that we can get into later.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But we'll have to see what happens this week. Penultimate episode, and I'm excited to get into it. I'm not sure when, I guess potentially Thursday night, but we'll keep everyone posted when we're podcasting.
Yeah, stay tuned. 2 more episodes. I can't believe it. Grab your torches and head back to camp.
Good night.